very much, and thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Chief Bradley, thank you for your presentation about the proposed emergency rule, which may be a well-intentioned rule. Of course, we want our first responders and firefighters to have the highest level of protection and preparedness. But as you explained in your testimony, it could very well have some severe unintended consequences in terms, for example, of the cost that it imposes on volunteer fire departments. And I think OSHA has put it at a figure of like $14,000, but does that sound realistic to you as to what the actual cost of this will be?
Thank you, Chairman Kiley. No, the $1,400,000 won't even buy 2 air packs. The average cost of purchasing turnout gear for a firefighter is $4,000. Many volunteer fire departments struggle when they bring on a new member to simply equip them with gear because of that cost. If you figure an estimated budget of $75,000, an air pack costs $9,000, you can see that $14,000 to replace the equipment some of these standards would require is excessive.
Yeah, I think that there's just sort of a lack of understanding by those who drafted this rule about how volunteer firefighters really work. I mean, I have, counties in my district that have a dozen different fire departments. Some of them are in areas that are hard to get to and are largely volunteer driven. And so these departments are carrying a heavy burden for their communities with very few resources, and they are really the first line of defense. I mean, if they're not able to address a situation immediately, it could grow into a much larger problem. And so if this rule goes forward, could you just help us understand what some of the trade-offs might be in terms of the consequences for these volunteer fire departments that are now going to be even more under-resourced?
Thank you. First off, no one's tried harder to reduce firefighter injuries and firefighter deaths than the fire service itself. Many of these volunteer fire departments apply NFPA standards as they can. But if you consider that these local communities have to do their own fundraising for fire departments, sometimes firefighters have to buy their own gear. This added burden may very well close a volunteer fire department in a rural community. If they do that, then the community faces extended travel times from a neighboring area to get fire protection, increased insurance rates because insurance services offices rate areas for homeowners insurance and business insurance based on fire protection. So the unintended consequences of closing fire departments will be critical, especially in rural and suburban communities.
Such an important point that this could well close volunteer fire departments and leave these areas unprotected. I hope that message is heard by our friends at OSHA. Mr. Gerstenberger, what do you think it's going to take for OSHA to finally do a tree care standard? As you mentioned, we've written a bipartisan letter urging them to do so. You said they've put it off, 7 times or something like that, even during the current administration. What's it going to take? Why are they dragging their feet?
I'm hopeful, Mr. Chairman, that it will take a strong word from this committee and or reviewing the proceedings of this hearing to prompt further action. I have to think at this point that proposed language is pretty much in place and could be released, and we pursue the process from there. But quite frankly, I'm befuddled by why it's taken 25 years from the time we first raised the issue and 18 years from when we petitioned for it, and why the proposed rule has been delayed in publication 7 times in the past 39 months. I'm completely befuddled by that. And
it is befuddling, and it's also tragic, because you mentioned just over the last 4 years we've had 240 fatalities in the industry. That's 10 times higher than the average rate. Do you believe that some of those lives would have been saved if we had an adequate standard?
Using a very rough estimate, Chairman, since we petitioned for the standard, we've lost probably in excess of 1,000 people in this industry. One loss is too many, obviously. Could an OSHA rule prevent all these? Absolutely not. That's just not realistic, but it could have prevented some.
It could have prevented some. We would have saved lives with a standard. And, we've heard some excuses today, like the budget isn't there. Well, the budget has gone up significantly during this administration, hasn't it? And haven't there been, you said, 10 other actions that were taken by OSHA? Well, they neglected to take action here?
I don't have any particular insight as to the adequacy of OSHA's resources, its budget. My association faces budget constraints every year, and I know that what we try to do with limited resources is to make sure we get the most bang for our buck.
That's right.
And I would take a data-driven approach to, how OSHA can get the most bang for its buck. And I would say that producing a standard for a relatively small industry with an incredibly high fatality rate would be a good way of affecting its mission.
Thank you very much. I hope that message is heard loud and clear by OSHA. Let's get this done. It will save lives. I now recognize the representative from California, Mr. Takano.
Oh, thank